We have three excellent people to start the reflection. The first of them is Rosi Braidotti, who has kindly come from Utrecht this morning, where she's a distinguished university professor at the University of Utrecht and founding director of the Center for the Humanities. Many of us, I think, know her work for her concept of a nomadic subject, and starting from the idea of nomadism to rethink what it means to be a citizen. And so I'm delighted that she's going to open up our reflections today. So, Rosi, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman, person, individual, citizen. It's a great pleasure to be here. It's terribly intimidating to be speaking in this grandiose building. I feel we should take a vote immediately for something. But I think it's very important that normal citizens like us sit in here and debate crucial issues. My line to open the discussion is going to be a little bit maybe provocative, in the sense that I am actually going to recite almost a love poem to the European Union. I am going to just remind us of what this dream was all about. And I choose the word dream very carefully. In preparing for this event, I consulted some of my pan-Europeanist friends and advisors. I telephoned Luisa Passerini in Turin. She was at the European Institute for many years and is a holder of a ERC grant, advanced grant on images of Europe. I also called Yves Meny, former president of the European Institute in Fiesole, and I said, how come that ideas and projects which up to 8 years ago were perfectly reasonable and sensible and realistic, the project of a European political union, the project of an expansion of the European Union to encompass the Mediterranean region, the idea that the euro would provide a shield for our currencies and a protection for our job market. How come all of this, which seemed perfectly reasonable as a program up to 8 years ago, is now sunk to the level of a dream? A utopia. I recently wrote a variation of my nomadic citizenship argument for a journal, and the reviewer said, Braidotti believes in the European Union, in spite of all the evidence. How naive. And I thought, what is going on here? At what particular point did a serious, respectable program sort of deteriorate in the public image to the extent that it's a dream, a utopia, a naivete? How many more times do we have to listen to CNN saying, ooh, crisis in Cyprus, the dying act of the European Union. Ooh, crisis in Greece, the last act of this dying enterprise. At what particular point did the social imaginary about the European Union become forensic? We are dealing with a corpse here. So I would like us to put this at the center, and I would love one of the things that we do today to do a cartography of this forensic social imaginary. It's as if we were already dealing with a corpse, as if in fact all that's left for us to do is to bury this thing, go back to liras, pesetas, and all the other things, and sink to the level of a very well-off, irrelevant periphery of the world, which would be the continent of Europe. Can we address this, please? Can we take it on seriously? We need a cartography of these different types of Euroscepticism, which are not the traditional Euroscepticism of the right-wing nationalist, protectionist, who never wanted to release the powers of the nation states and always opposed the project of the European Union. You may remember Stuart Hall saying the great opposition to the European Union is the right-wing nationalist, populist all over Europe, from the Lega to the Pim Fortuyn's, Wilders people in the Netherlands, who do not want to relinquish even regional power, let alone national one. That's the traditional Euroscepticism, very rampant, very lively, and up and running from Scandinavian through to the south of Europe, but that's kind of classical. The other classical form of Euroscepticism is, of course, the far left, the far left with its residual Marxist Leninist delirious dreams, who is all forever escaping into fantasies of world revolutions and never takes accountability for what is happening in our own backyard. And I'm speaking here as a woman of the left, genetically of the left. So two forms of Euroscepticism, one flying into hyper-nationalism, the other flying anywhere in the world except in our own backyard, because of course we have inherited from the years of Marxism the idea that taking care of Europe is a form of narcissism and a betrayal of the world revolution, which is forever happening in something that we call the developing world, wherever that may be. So these classical forms of Euroscepticism are still alive and well, but in a sense we know them. My argument is that I think we have something else going on here, something of a melancholia, something of a sort of, if we think with Paul Gilroy, post-colonial melancholia, I think we have a sort of post-European Union melancholia, a forensic social imaginary. I'd love to hear from you about this and make a series of mappings of how this takes shapes in the different social realities, and I wonder whether there isn't a sort of an intrinsic pessimism that has come into our perception of our location as European citizens. Could we ever, for 3 minutes, actually list some of the good things that are happening in the European Union? Could we just mention for every negative one positive? Could we agree to this as a modus operandi for the day? Or do we disagree with this, and do we think that indeed we are dealing with a corpse here, so the day is one elaborate funeral of a dream? So this is what I would like to push, and I think the question of the social imaginary is crucial here, because European citizens is made of citizens, and citizens are subjects, political, ethical, affective subjects. What goes on in those subjects' minds and what goes on between their minds is of the greatest importance. I am from the humanities and from philosophy, and I believe that citizenship is made of identities, identifications, images, representations, and self-representations. We need to work a lot harder into instilling into the minds and the imaginary of each individual a sense of our respective Europeanness. Until we have a European social imaginary, we can't talk about social European citizenship. Of course, our great philosopher Habermas has addressed these issues. He says we don't have a European social imaginary. When you hear Beethoven's Ninth, the hymn to Europe, you are not likely to burst into tears, or are you? You remember the very bad joke by Woody Allen, every time I hear Beethoven's Ninth, I want to invade Poland, which doesn't do much for our social imaginary. I'm a vehement football fan. Every time Italy plays, and Misha knows this, I am wrapped up in my Italian flag crying like a good migrant. And when Italy plays Holland, the country where I live, I basically have to cross the border and leave because my life is in danger. If you recognize this, you will know that there is a sort of a visceral European nationalism made of gastronomy, footballs, and music that is fundamental in cementing our own imaginary as belonging to that particular culture, sometimes a regional culture, never quite a national one, that is the strength of this complex and polylingual, complicated continent that we're in. It's unimaginable that something analogous could happen at the European level. There can't even be a European football team, for Christ's sake. So there's nothing to get excited about. So where is the visceral, affective element of a European social imaginary? Something you think, I stand up for it. This is what I get excited about. Well, I think that the project of the European Union is about instilling a democratic social imaginary in a continent that has a historical deficit in democracy. I think that the dream of the European Union is to make us get excited about democracy, justice, respect for diversity, issues in which our culture, our continent has a historical deficit. And don't believe me, when you leave this building, look at the photos, look at the little documentary of photos that is wrapped around the central entrance to this building, stand for a minute and look at the tale that those pictures tell. And they tell a tale of a continent that emerges from the Second World War, 45, 46, in tatters, in pieces, needing assistance from the Allies, Marshall, Truman, and all those plans, to simply feed ourselves. And what is at the core of that disaster? European fascism, the Second World War. To enter this building, you entered through a gate called Altiero Spinelli. Do you even know who Altiero Spinelli was? A major anti-fascist resistance of not the Marxist kind, of the liberal and democratic kind. The first European commissioner, the man who drafted the documents that made the European Federation thinkable, possible, feasible, was exiled by Mussolini, beaten up like all the anti-fascists, married an incredible woman called Ursula Hirschman, the first of the great Eurofeminists. She started an organization called Femmes d'Europe, Women of Europe, one of the very first pan-Europeanist feminist organizations. Her brother, Albert Hirschman, the great economist, worked at Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton, and he was an advisor for the Allies after the end of fascism in 46 to 48. So by entering through those gates and by looking at those images, you already should know one fundamental lesson: the origin, the historical origins of the European Union are the defeat of fascism, the defeat of hyper-nationalism, never again. And that story, which is a historical fact, is the historical origins of the Union, is not told sufficiently in the contemporary public debates about this continent. The extent to which the historical roots of this project, the project of the European Union, are plunged in the debacle, in the moral and political defeat of European nationalism after the Second World War. But let your gaze continue across that set of photographs. It goes on. It says the European Union, first charter, Schuman, 1950, the Coal and Steel Union, Coal and Steel Union. Does that ring a bell? The armament industry, the Krupp factories, the disarmament of Europe after the Second World War. Never again another Franco-German war that escalates into a world war. Disarmament, peace, crucial to this project. Let your gaze continue. 60s, of course, Berlin Wall, Cold War, the world divided, and then the new democracies of the 70s. Now, we always think, oh, Europe, 18th century, the place that has given the world democracy and human rights. When did Greece become a democracy? When did Portugal become a democracy? When did Spain become a democracy? Look at those photos outside this building, okay? You know the dates, they're there. Portugal, 74. Greece, 1974. Spain, 1975. That's yesterday. Yesterday. Italy is still trying to become a democracy, but we're still at it. But we have it sort of in our constitution, but de facto it's a different story. A very recent story. And what was there before? Fascist dictatorship, military dictatorship, well into the 70s. Some of you were born, what, in the 80s? You were born just in time to be free. Narrow escape there, close shave. Think about issues like that before you spit on the European Union as a dead project. We have really come such a long way from the roots of that hyper-nationalistic military impulse to deny democracy. And the European Union is the alternative. It's trying to make us excited about a very different set of ideas and premises. Continue, let your gaze go on. It will go to 89, the defeat of communism, the end of that nightmare. Again, 89. Some of you may have been even alive then. It really is yesterday. Very quick progressions, a quick quick enough in some ways, but very recent developments as well. My argument then is that the European Union, as what I call a nomadic project, as a transformative project, is a sobering attempt to make us feel responsible for the specific location that we inhabit. A location is a geopolitical space, but a location is also a historical memory. We have a duty to remember why we have the project of the European Union, where this is coming from, and not be sort of confused and distracted by the eternal prophets of doom that can only look at the things that go wrong. Yes, of course, things go wrong, a lot goes wrong. We will hear a long list of this today. But the basic insight of this project is to make us excited about very worthy causes. Essentially, the defeat of the virus of European nationalism. Altiero Spinelli has written beautiful pages on this, because he lived through fascism, and as a Jewish person lived through persecution, racial stereotyping, and he simply decided that we needed to denazify the European social imaginary. And that's what the European Union is all about. Remember that before you go forensic and melancholy and whatever you attempt to do. Remember what the alternatives have been in our history. Remember what it would have been like had you been born before 74 or 75 in some parts of this continent. So this is the dream, and I know that it is controversial, and I feel a little bit tacky bringing it up. But the point, it's a meta-methodological point I want to make, is not only these ideals are worthy, but they touch upon the crucial issue of what we remember, how we remember, and through the memory, the question of our imaginary. What is your representation of your being a European today? What memory do you bring to it? And those memories are very specific. I come from feminist theory, and in feminist theory, the personal is the political, and locations are very important methodological tools. What you remember and what you choose to forget, and what you cannot forget, what you forgot to forget, i.e. what you remember, what you're able to repeat, are crucial elements of your sense of yourself, of your social imaginary, and of your sense of belonging. It makes a hell of a difference what part of the world you're from. It makes a lot of difference whether you're a post-colonial subject, whether you're a temporary worker, an asylum seeker, double nationality, no nationality in some cases. It makes an enormous amount of difference where and how you got to a sense of your own Europeanness. We need to make very careful charts, very careful mappings of how your sense of your European location enters the situation here, what memory you bring to it, what factors you take into account. And I know that those of you who are under 30, you grew up in a world where equation, fascism, communism, same catastrophe is probably part of your intellectual instrumentarium, of your intellectual horizon. I would beg you to freeze even that equation and look at it very, very carefully, or at least let's discuss it, whether dismissing all the horrors of the 20th century through a flattening out of their specificity is the best way to deal with the complexities of a history that is really heavy to carry. I would argue fascism and communism, very different horrors, maybe equal on the scale of horrors, but very, very different. Very different in relation to imperialism and colonialism, which is the other factor that we need to take into account here. Paul Gilroy argues that fascism was just colonialism coming home, that we did to each other what we had done to the Africans and the Asians in our imperial conquest. A bit of a harsh judgment, but an interesting theory of fascism, and that is very important to our understanding of then how the European Union would attempt to be polycultural, multicultural, and respectful of diversity in order not to repeat those instinct, those visceral reactions of intolerance and denial of otherness. So locations, where do you come in? What memory do you bring to it? What forms of ignorance do you bring into this? And how can we help each other complete the picture of a European Union project that is supposed to be the antidote to all that was wrong with the old Europe that emerges from the Second World War in tatters. I will not repeat, what have I, 3 minutes left? I will not repeat my ideas of the nomadic citizenship, except that there is one sentence in the presentation of today that sums it up beautifully. I believe that the project of European citizenship should be extended to cover residence and not nationality. I think anybody who lives in this continent and works and pays tax ought to have access to European citizenship. And what's more, the system that we have of European citizenship, because it delinks territory from citizenship. The legal rights are not the same as nationality rights. It's already a delinked system, legally speaking. That system could easily be extended to cover people who were not born in any of the nation states of this federation. It's not really a federation, of this union, but are here legally, visibly, no taxation without representation, flexible citizenship for a great deal of people that at the moment are lumped as migrants, passers-bys, illegals, aliens, Martians. Why not flexible citizens for the periods of time that they reside legally on our territory and pay tax and work? So residence, presence, and not nationality, not blood and soil as the principles. There's also people working on this. Ulrich Preuss in Berlin is working on this. Sheila Ben Habib in Yale is working on this. And the basis is the legal structure of European citizenship, which has delinked ethnicity, nationality, from the legal requirements of citizenship. All of us have to become Europeans, Spanish, Italian, British. You're born in those countries, then you have to go one step up, you become European. Of course, if you're a member of the nation state, that transition is automatic, but there is nothing here except political badwill that prevents us from extending that move to other people, because that attribution of citizenship is independent of belonging to a territory. That's the genius of the European legal construction of citizenship. The only other precedent for this is the Northern Ireland peace treaty, which also delinks citizenship from territory. But these are perfectly strong, brilliant legal prototypes which we could use politically if there was a will. But of course, the political will for the moment is not there. A lot more to say, but my final plea would be, are you interested in the project of developing a European social imaginary? Is that something that quickens your blood, or shall we go immediately into the morgue and choose the flowers and the music for this beautiful dream that lays, unfortunately, to a certain degree in tatters? You know where I'm standing, and it is still to come. It's right in front of us, and it's a brilliant and necessary project. So now, before I start breaking into a song, I will stop. Thank you.